The president defends his cautious foreign policy as he addresses graduating cadets at West Point. Plus, we finally hear from the man who leaked U.S. secrets before hiding out in Russia.
It's being called an explosive investigation into Planned Parenthood. I'm Jason Calvi at the Capitol. I'll have that story next.
And tonight we say goodbye to author and activist Maya Angelou. We'll look back at her life and legacy. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, May 28th, 2014. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick. We begin looking at news now. President Barack Obama said the U.S. remains the world's most indispensable nation, adding, quote, America must always lead on the world stage. His comments came today in a commencement speech to graduating cadets at West Point. Defending his foreign policy, the president said that after a long season of war, restraint is needed before embarking on more military adventures. His critics contend that the president's approach to global problems has been too cautious and has emboldened adversaries. Today, he pushed back against that criticism.
The United States will use military force unilaterally if necessary when our core interests demand it. When our people are threatened, when our livelihoods are at stake, when the security of our allies is in danger.
The president said terrorism remains the most direct threat to American security. He argued, though, that as the threat has shifted from a centralized al-Qaeda to smaller groups, the American response must change, too. Secretary of State John Kerry says National Security Agency leaker Edward Snowden is a fugitive. Today, he challenged Snowden to, quote, man up and come back to the United States. Kerry discussed Snowden in a national broadcast interview. He was asked about the former NSA member's claim that his passport has been revoked. Kerry said Snowden is welcome to come back to the United States and make his case to the American people. He explained how people have been placed in danger because of Snowden's revelations.
We have evidence that people are in additional danger because operational security has been breached, because terrorists have learned firsthand about methods and mechanisms by which the United States collects intelligence. And so our operations have been compromised. It's plain and simple.
The Secretary of State's comments come after a separate NBC News interview with Edward Snowden himself. He explained that he was more than just a low-level analyst working with different government agencies. He said the government might deny this, but he was trained as a spy.
Well, it's no secret that the U.S. tends to get more and better intelligence out of computers nowadays than they do out of people. I was trained as a spy in sort of the traditional sense of the word, in that I lived and worked undercover overseas, pretending to work in a job that I'm not, and even being assigned a name that was not mine.
The former contract employee at the NSA has been charged with espionage and other offenses here in the U.S. He could face 30 years in prison if he's convicted. He continues to receive asylum from Russia. Well, a new report accuses Planned Parenthood of lies, corruption, and scandal. Now it's made its way to Capitol Hill. Our Jason Calvi is there with the story tonight and the group behind the project. Jason?
Hey, Brian, the group putting out the report calls it explosive. Live Action, they're best known for their undercover investigations into Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry. And after 6 years of these investigations, they put all their research into one document, and today they're sharing that document with every member of Congress. Take a look at one of Live Action's undercover videos.
It doesn't even look like a baby yet.
It doesn't.
We've documented the rampant sexual abuse cover-up, institutional nationwide sexual abuse cover-up of minor girls, even the willingness to aid and abet sex trafficking.
And today, Live Action President Lila Rose and others take 6 years of research to the halls of Congress.
This is a bipartisan. So we're approaching both Democrats and Republicans because they both need to know, and independents, they all need to know the truth about the abortion industry and where this government money is going.
The group is urging Congress and the states to stop funding Planned Parenthood.
$500 million, over $500 million, almost over half of Planned Parenthood's entire budget. And this is an organization which has been criminally investigated, which has been sued, which has been exposed time and time again.
Planned Parenthood has said the videos do not accurately portray what happened, and some pro-lifers have raised issues with Live Action's tactics.
I entirely praise Live Action's goals, but the main issue, and I think this is deeply troubling, is simply the fact that Jesus never tempted people to commit or participate in grave evil in order that the greater good could be done.
But Rose responds,
this is not only a business, this is a tax-funded organization, corporation, committing what we see as the greatest human rights abuse of the day, killing the child when they're the weakest and the most vulnerable. They're hidden from the public's view, and it's up to us, because no one else is doing this work, to expose it.
And the investigations continue for Live Action. They tell me right now they're in the midst of finishing up their latest investigation. They won't tell me the topic, but they do say it'll be out in the coming weeks. Brian?
Look forward to that. Thank you, Jason. We're joined by Alison Howard of Concerned Women for America and Anna Franzonello of Americans United for Life. How do you think that members of Congress will receive this report?
I hope they received it with open arms. You know, if a report like this was done for Walmart or for Best Buy, people would be up in arms. But it's really revealing the hypocrisy of the left and the media here. This report showed what Planned Parenthood fears. They paint a really rosy picture of their services and what they provide to women. And this report showed not only instances of child abuse, but aiding and abetting sex traffickers. This report talked about the inherent racism of their practices and also very serious crimes that have gone unreported, including rape that went unreported in places like Arizona that led to more. So I hope they've received it and looked through it just like we did today. It's shocking.
It's a pretty bold move on the part of Live Action. Do you think this will cross party lines here, Anna?
It will a little bit, but unfortunately we do see somewhat of a bias. And, you know, like Alison said, we hope that Congress will give this a fair reading, a fair shake. But we know that there are members who are, you know, on Planned Parenthood's payroll, essentially. And that, you know, but we do have a number of strong Republicans and Democrats who have looked at Planned Parenthood in the past, and I think will receive this report the way that we hope that they will, and look towards actions that Congress can take against this big abortion industry.
Is there anything new in the report, or is it a compilation of other results of these investigations that have been ongoing?
Sure. Live Action's been doing a great job at highlighting kind of what's going on behind the scenes here. This is just a compilation of what they've been doing in the past 6 years and presents it in a very easy to read way so that anyone on any level can understand the corruption and the indecency and the crime that's happening here. And I just need to make this point that the same people who are saying that there is an inherent hostile environment for women, that pushed equal pay for equal work, which already is law of the land, refuse to look at this hostile environment, where we have women coming out of the trenches of Planned Parenthood and waving the white flag and saying, look over here. And they look away. They're saying, look over here. Girls are not being helped that are stuck in prostitution or sex trafficking, and they are looking away. And so I think that Live Action calling on Congress to halt and suspend the $500 million of taxpayer money they receive is a brilliant idea, and I think it's the only fair and just thing to do at this point.
Alison, you and Anna and even Lila Rose of Live Action, you are young women of childbearing years. Aren't you and your peers really the target of this organization?
Yeah, I mean, I was on every flyer that they sent out during the last election. I fit that demographic that Planned Parenthood thinks is their supporters and who they're looking to get in their doors. But I mean, ironically enough, they really aren't the defenders of women that they say that they are, and that the mainstream media has let them get away with. You see women like Alison, myself, Lila, like you mentioned, who don't believe in what Planned Parenthood is trying to sell us.
And you're young, you're attractive, you're smart. Hopefully, young women will hear the message from you.
Absolutely. I really think that this is starting a good conversation, that our youth, us growing up, we might not have heard about abortion, we might not have heard about what is actually happening, but I think now grown-ups, young people alike, are having to look at what's really happening in utero and what really is best for women and children. And so we thank Live Action and thank you guys for covering it. The real issue is whether the rest of the networks will cover this as well.
Right.
Well, we'll continue to cover it. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Miners from Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region took to the streets today, supporting pro-Russian separatists. About 500 miners marched to the city's main plaza. Some held banners with the names of their mining plants. They say their region needs to be independent from Ukraine. Many of the locals see the Ukrainian government as nationalist, determined to quiet Russian speakers in the east. The airport and nearby streets were closed because of clogged traffic. Well, a Polish priest who was abducted in Donetsk is free and well tonight. Poland's foreign ministry says Father Paweł Witek was under Polish diplomats' care after his release today. He was reported missing Tuesday when he didn't show up for midday prayers at his parish. In Thailand, anti-coup protests continue as leading political figures have now been set free by the military rulers who now run that country. They were held at an army base for nearly a week. About 300 demonstrators swarmed around the army and military police in the center of Bangkok earlier today. The protesters threw bottles and other objects, forcing police to withdraw. The political leaders were released under the condition they promised to do nothing provocative. Thousands voted today in Syria's presidential election. The official vote won't take place in Syria itself until June 3rd. But ballot boxes were open to those living in embassies abroad. More than 1 million Syrians live in Lebanon as refugees, and many packed the embassy there to vote today. President Bashar Assad is expected to be re-elected for his third 7-year term in spite of Syria's deadly ongoing civil war. Voter turnout was low in Egypt today, even after voting was extended to a third day. This robs Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of the strong show of public support that he was seeking. He wanted to prove to critics that this election reflects the will of the people after ousting the nation's first freely elected president, Mohamed Morsi. El-Sisi's opponent protested the voting extension, saying it aimed to distort the will of the people. Well, after a giant Colorado mudslide left 3 ranchers missing, authorities are bracing for yet another mudslide. Geologists say another slide seems inevitable because of a water buildup in a depression created by the first mudslide. They say it's impossible to predict when another slide might occur. Yesterday, the search for 3 missing ranchers was suspended because of the unstable conditions. There's a chance that search will resume later if stability improves. The National Organization for Marriage is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to block a federal judge's order that declares Oregon's same-sex marriage ban unconstitutional. The motion was filed with Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy. He could act on the request alone or refer it to the full court. This motion comes as several states in recent weeks have overturned state laws defining marriage as the union of one man and one woman. Brian Brown, president of the National Organization for Marriage, is with us tonight. Why challenge this particular ruling? What is so important about this case in Oregon?
Well, the reason it's important is pretty simple. You have a situation in Oregon in which not only did the Attorney General not defend the law, she actually threw in with the plaintiffs. So there was no one in Oregon defending the votes of millions of people in Oregon. There was no one defending marriage. And so we filed a motion to intervene and a motion for a stay. With no one else at the table defending the law, there could be no stay. So again, with our motion to intervene, that gives an opportunity to have a stay on the decision, and that has been the norm with these judicial decisions, that there's a stay put on, and so they are not implemented immediately.
So as the National Organization for Marriage takes this legal direction, what can we do to defend traditional Christian marriage without condemning the people who think that gay couples should be able to marry?
Look, I mean, we know the truth of what marriage is. Obviously, Scripture begins with marriage. It's in the middle of Scripture. It's at the end of Scripture. It's a beautiful symbol, and it's a beautiful truth. We need to be able to articulate that truth publicly, and we need to be able to do so without fear. Proponents of same-sex marriage have attempted to sort of smear those of us that believe marriage is the union of a man and a woman as hateful, as bigoted, or as intolerant. That is not true, and we cannot internalize that untruth. With love, we need to boldly proclaim this simple truth. Children deserve the right to have both a mother and a father. That is in their best interest, and the votes of Americans count. It is not right that one branch, that one judge can unilaterally, by judicial fiat, overturn the vote of millions of Americans. That is not right. That is not the way our system is supposed to work, and we need to stand up for that truth.
But this feels like an all-out onslaught on the institution of marriage. Can that institution withstand this?
Well, I think it can. Again, we've had a lot of bad news in recent days, but again, this is coming from judges. This is not coming from people voting. You hear time and time again that somehow the people of this country now embrace the redefinition of marriage. That is not true. If it was true, the other side would be going to the ballot box and attempting to have votes on it. Instead, that whole that is gone. They're now going directly to judges, and this should give you hope. The Supreme Court of the United States, after 2 lower courts refused to issue stays in Utah, did something that's quite unique. The Supreme Court stepped in and said there will be a stay on this decision, and that means that there's hope that the Supreme Court may say these lower court decisions are thrown out, and we need to do everything we can do to make clear to the justices that that is the right thing to do.
And very quickly, preview the March for Marriage that's coming up?
One of the most important things we can do, stand together on June 19th. We will gather together. Archbishop Cordileone from San Francisco, a number of great speakers will be here in Washington, D.C., 11 o'clock, June 19th, in front of the Capitol. You can get more information at marriagemarch.org. It will be a diverse crowd, people from all different faiths and backgrounds coming together to stand for the truth of marriage.
All right, from the Organization for Marriage, the national organization, Brian Brown, thank you for being with us. Coming up, Pope Francis shares the joy of his Holy Land pilgrimage with a welcoming crowd in St. Peter's Square. And students return to class on a California campus where a young man went on a killing spree. Can such violence be stopped? Thanks so much for joining us on this Wednesday, May 28th on EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Pope Francis spoke with joy today about his Holy Land pilgrimage. During his general audience, the Holy Father said his journey was a great grace for him and for the whole church. He asserted the pilgrimage was to encourage efforts of those who work for peace in the Middle East and those who care for people suffering from war and violence. He said he wishes to affirm the faith of the Christian communities in the Holy Land and acknowledge their difficulties. Meanwhile, Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi says no date has been set yet for Pope Francis to meet with clergy sex abuse victims. The Holy Father mentioned the meeting on the papal plane returning from the Holy Land. The Pope strongly denounced clerical sex abuse of children, calling it a betrayal of the Lord's body. He also announced he'll soon celebrate a private mass for some abuse victims at the Vatican guest house where he lives. Monsignor Stephen Rossetti, a licensed psychologist who has written on child abuse prevention, is back with us tonight. What do you think the significance of this meeting that Pope Francis announced is?
Well, Brian, I think it's a couple of things. First of all, the Church is trying to say through its Holy Father, this is important to us. So it's showing the significance of this issue and the importance of reaching out to victims. But secondly, it's important for the Church to hear the voices of the victims. One of the things that we did in America in 2002 was the American bishops heard directly, for one of the first time for some of them, from 4 victims. And this really, I think, galvanized the bishops to really understand better the pain, the suffering, and the need for us to reach out in compassion and healing. So it really, I think, galvanizes the Church to listen to the voice of victims.
Pope Francis has been very effective in reaching out to the marginalized. He's very approachable. Everybody says that about him. Does this set the stage for that meeting?
Yes, I think everyone knows, and it seems very genuine. You know, he seems like a very genuine, compassionate person. When he kissed the hands of those Holocaust survivors in the Holy Land, you sense that, and that's, I think, why people are so attracted to him. He's just a warm, a compassionate person.
Boston Cardinal Sean O'Malley will be at the Mass that he's celebrating, a private Mass for this small group. Tell us a little bit more about that commission that O'Malley is part of.
It's an important commission. In the midst of this Vatican reorganization, when everything else is pretty much on hold, the Holy Father has basically said this is such an important issue we can't wait. So he established a papal commission on prevention of child abuse. And also on the commission, there's an equal number of men and women. And that's a fascinating statement that we want to mine the gifts of women and have them in church leadership. And also on the papal commission is a victim. Marie Collins from Ireland. And again, another strong statement that the Church needs to listen to victims.
All right, we'll continue to follow that commission and its work. I'd like you to stay with us for a moment, too. I want you to comment on this next story. Students at the University of California, Santa Barbara are back in class today, just 5 days after a violent rampage on campus. 6 students were left dead, and the gunman made the 7th. Yesterday was declared a day of mourning on campus. A California state leader is calling for law enforcement officers to check if mentally troubled people have purchased weapons. 22-year-old Elliot Roger, the attacker, had posted an internet video outlining his plan to kill as many people as possible. So as a psychologist, Monsignor Rossetti, is there any way to see this coming in time to stop something like this?
There are some red flags, and there were some in this case. There were violent videos, overtures. He had bought some weapons. He was mentally ill. There were signs, some red flags. As a matter of fact, the parents were so concerned, they called the civil authorities. So in that case, there were some red flags, but sometimes there aren't.
You talked about the videos. There's so much evil out there. Talk about the role of evil in this darkness that we often experience in the news.
Well, it's obviously the young man was mentally ill, but at the same time, when you looked at what he had to say in his video, it was such horrible things he said about slaughtering people and the things he wanted in life, where he wanted wealth and power and sex and adulation, very narcissistic. It makes you wonder about the influence of evil. And also in the Fort Hood shooter, you remember, he said that he was full of hatred, that his peace was gone, and that the devil would take him. And so this raging hatred is always a bad sign. Both of these shooters, they said, I'm full of hatred. And I, as a psychologist and as a priest, when someone says that, it's always a bad sign, and it makes you wonder about some deeper problems.
Yeah, very troubling. Let's pray for their souls and the souls of all the victims. Monsignor Rossetti, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Up next, some kids from the Congo come home to Rome. We'll have their story tonight, and a tribute to celebrated poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou. You're watching EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. It's good to have you with us. And today, a group of children and their new parents enjoyed a joyful, long-delayed reunion. Watch these kids run to their adoptive parents' arms after an overnight flight from the Congo in West Africa to Rome. The 31 children have been blocked for months from leaving the Western African nation. Congo suspended all international adoptions last year, citing concerns that some children might have been trafficked. As a result, parents were forced to leave Congo without their adopted children when their visas expired. Italian officials say all the children are healthy, thank God. One of America's most celebrated poets, novelists, and civil rights activists has passed away. Tonight, EWTN's Catherine Zeltner looks back at the life and legacy of Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou, one of the most honored writers of her generation, has passed away. Angelou is remembered as a celebrated poet, novelist, and civil rights activist. Born in St. Louis in the 1920s, Angelou moved to San Francisco as a teen, enrolling at the San Francisco Labor School to study dance and drama. At 14, she would drop out, becoming San Francisco's first African-American cable car conductor. She would eventually move abroad, living in Ghana in the 1960s, where she met Malcolm X. In 1964, she moved back to the U.S., helped him build his new organization of African American Unity. After Malcolm X's assassination, Angelou served as Northern Coordinator for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In 1970, she would write her most popular novel, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which received international acclaim.
I used to think I was a writer who could teach, but I found out I'm a teacher who can write.
Eventually, Angelou served on 2 presidential committees, was awarded the Presidential Medal of Arts in 2000 and the Lincoln Medal in 2008. In 1993, President Bill Clinton requested that she compose a poem to read at his inauguration, which she read and was broadcast around the world. She also garnered 3 Grammy Awards. Dr. Angelou received more than 30 honorary degrees and most recently was a professor of American Studies at Wake Forest University. Dr. Maya Angelou was 86 years old. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. An incredibly long and productive life. EWTN News Nightly is now on 5 nights a week, so be sure to join us tomorrow. Until then, you can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can catch us again anytime on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you for watching tonight. Good night and God bless you.